God bless you. Thank you.
I told you wanted to listen to him. I told him he could speak for another hour and y'all'd still be here cheering. Now, our next speaker is a good friend, a longtime friend, a guy who when he was in the Senate, I was so proud of him and what he did. He started the Senate Conservatives Fund. He had this idea, maybe a little crazy, that maybe conservatives sometimes need to say no to their own side. And maybe we need to get new conservatives, not just Republicans, but conservatives into the Senate. If you heard of Marco Rubio, you need to know that he's there largely because of our next speaker, and Ted Cruz, and Rand Paul, and Pat Toomey, and Mike Lee, and so many of the solid conservatives in the Senate, because our next speaker had the vision and the integrity to bring in new conservatives, sometimes being at odds with his own party in the Senate. And then he left the Senate and went to his dream job, the president of the Heritage Foundation. Now, those of us who know the Heritage Foundation, have been longtime supporters of the Heritage Foundation, we just assumed that Ed Follner would be there forever. But Ed decided he was ready to go play golf and needed somebody to replace him. And so he found the senator from South Carolina, who, despite all the things you might have read in the media, often put there by other Republicans, that he was some sort of firebrand conservative and was just saying no and had no ideas, those people who know JimDeMint know he's an ideas guy. He is an ideas guy whose idea is we need to get the country working again, who's committed to limited government, who understands that one size fits all from Washington isn't what this country needs, and who is fundamentally committed to coming up with the new ideas of an old conservatism to reinvigorate it. That the ideas that Republicans campaign on, that they champion in terms of policy, their foundation may be old, but we can't run on the playbook from 30 and 40 years ago. How do we transcend and reinvigorate the ideas of a good ideology? The Heritage Foundation is the organization I rely on. I got to tell you, when I fill in for folks on the radio, I wake up, and of course I go to my own site, but I go to the Heritage Foundation because they have ideas. They have a commitment to freedom, a commitment to liberty, a commitment to smaller government. They come up with the ideas that our men and women in Congress can then pursue, and they work to try to convince the nation that these are sound ideas. They work with states. I've been a believer in the Heritage Foundation. I grew up in Dubai, and my mother would get a calendar from the Heritage Foundation. And in getting that calendar, it was filled with quotes from Margaret Thatcher, and it was filled with quotes from Ronald Reagan, and it was filled with quotes from some guy named Edmund Burke I'd never heard of. And it had pictures of these people, and I mean, I grew up in Dubai and would get mail from the Heritage Foundation. And so I knew it was a good place. If my mom and dad liked it, it had to be good. And then I started RedState, and I got to know people at the Heritage Foundation, got to go to their fantastic building in Washington. When I'm in Washington, I do my radio show from there. And I got to know Ed Follner, who's a wonderful guy. And while I knew Ed, I knew JimDeMint in the Senate. And for a while there, I wouldn't talk to JimDeMint, wouldn't return his phone calls, didn't really want to engage in emails with him, because I knew that anything I wrote at RedState, he was getting blamed for by his colleagues. So I could honestly say we haven't spoken. But he's actually a very good friend, and he's now the president of the Heritage Foundation. He's re-energized them, reinvigorated them. He's championing Heritage Action for America as an offshoot of the Heritage Foundation to support conservatives around the country, to support the grassroots. He has gone around the country convincing Americans that they do need to defund Obamacare. He has helped write the battle plan for the conservative movement. But more importantly these days, he's helped writing the new ideas for a conservative movement that its greatest spokesman these days is the President of the United States, in contrast to what the president wants. I mean, honestly, JimDeMint's got an easy job these days. He can just point over to the White House and say the opposite of them, and people kind of get it. So if he is in the room now, yes, good, all right. I want to introduce to you, and you know, people in Washington, they say friend, and they just mean we see each other at cocktail parties in Washington, D.C. I actually can say my friend, JimDeMint.
Thank you. Great job.
Do you want to take questions? Or?
Yes, should I?
Okay.
Yeah, that's
right,
yeah. Oh, good. Good, we'll do that. Thank you, Eric. Thanks for having me. Thanks for being here. This is about my 10th time being in Texas since I came to Heritage. There's a lot of action here, as you know, and got a lot of great representatives in the Senate and back here of our ideas. I was actually here last week with the ALEC group of state legislators. I got a chance to be on stage with Rick Perry for a few minutes, and you know, he's got a lot of concerns. I mean, they've done such a good job here in Texas of making this one of the best places in the world to do business and to live. And you got people coming from all over the country want to live here. You know, he's afraid he's actually going to have to put the National Guard on the borders to keep the people from California and Illinois from coming in here. It's a lot of challenges there, but it's great to be with you and to talk about how we can pull ourselves together to turn this country around. And I don't know about you, but I'm starting to get the feeling that the people in Washington are not on our side. It's just a hunch at this point, but you know, they may still be a representative government, but they're not representing us. They're not. No, they're not. I mean, not the hardworking, tax-paying Americans. They're representing more and more the big, politically well-connected groups, special interest groups that just seem to just control what's going on in Washington. That's what we've got to change. And I want to talk more about what's not working in Washington, but before I do, I just want to spend a couple of minutes to talk about what's working in America. Because we can't forget, folks, even though we watch the news, we worry about our country, we get frustrated, we're outraged out, that we are so blessed to live in this country, the greatest, the land of opportunity, the greatest country ever been on the face of the earth, the most powerful, the most compassionate, the most prosperous. We couldn't be given a bigger blessing than to live here. And that's what we're trying to protect. And really, one of the best parts about being at Heritage and traveling all over the country and working with all kinds of people and states is you realize America's still working. You know, people are still getting married and having children, sometimes not in that order, but they're still doing it. And we're not perfect here. But you've got great teachers, you got policemen and firemen, you got pastors helping to build a better community and keep it safe. You got volunteers from churches and charitable groups. In every community I've ever been in, or really what making the community work and trying to make it better for the future. You got entrepreneurs who are still starting businesses. You got inventors who are still amazing us with the things that they create. The country works. It's not working as well as it could if the government really did what it was supposed to. Because what the government's trying to do is replace all those things that are working with their ideas from Washington. And it's not working. And the people are getting angry about it. And that's what I sense all over the country, is the government is supposed to defend our homeland, provide justice for all, to make sure commerce between the states work, but it doesn't supposed to replace all of those things that work, that it's trying to do right now. And that's what people are upset about. And it's still fresh on our minds, and I'll go through a few of these things because this is what I hear all over the country. People still think about when our economy crashed a few years ago, and the big banks were so much a part of making that happen. And they saw their own government bail out these big banks. But not all the little guys across the country, the little businesses, the people that went out of business, they lost their fortunes, their savings. None of the people that we thought should be represented in Washington were helped. But the big banks, they were not only bailed out, they got behind closed doors with Dodd and Frank and helped to write that legislation that guaranteed they'd always be the big banks, that they'd always be too big to fail, and guaranteed that the community banks would likely fail. And people just seethed over that as they just, that's not fair, it's not just, it's just wrong. And it wasn't about, oh, we don't like the policy, we don't like the party. They just felt like it was not just, and that we want our government to provide justice. We saw what happened to General Motors and Chrysler. I mean, they had been brought down by years of the big union, strong-arm demands that just kept laying overhead after overhead. But what happened when they went down? I mean, the stockholders and the bondholders got stiffed, and a large part of the company was given to the unions. The very people that brought it down, and Americans just looked in on this and said, this isn't right. Americans deserve better than this. This is not the way our government should treat regular people. In addition to giving it to the unions, they took billions of dollars of taxpayer money and bailed them out and propped them up so that they could continue what they were doing. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, big part of driving our economy into the ground. Quasi-government agency. What happened to them? I mean, nothing. They got bailed out, basically taken over now by government. Billions and billions of dollars went into them. They're still there operating right now. And this kind of sense of injustice is what spawned this whole Tea Party movement, is called. But the Tea Party is just a small part of the majority of Americans who have that sense that the country's going in the wrong direction, that spirit of resistance against an oppressive government. And the Tea Party's been vilified all over the country. But to me, it's the most positive thing that's happened in the political life of America in my lifetime. And it's not partisan. If you've been to as many of them as I have, it's great. They don't like either political party. I mean, they are kind of a lot of recovering liberals. I mean, they're libertarians. It's a broad tent of Americans who just really want justice. They want the government to do what it's supposed to do. And it's still going on today, and it just pains me to look at even some of my Republican colleagues. I mean, there's this big bank, this big government bank called the Export-Import Bank. And what it does uses taxpayer money and gives it to foreign companies to buy American products. But it only is for a few companies of American products. It involves less than 2% of total exports. Most of the big companies of Boeing, and I love Boeing, they got a big plant in South Carolina, Boeing, but Caterpillar, General Electric, folks who could finance it themselves are benefiting most from this big bank. And what about the 98% of companies who are trying to do business around the world, but they don't get government assistance? It's just not, it's not fair to operate that way. And you don't have to talk too long about Obamacare to realize that this thing is not fair, it's not just. I mean, not only are people losing their insurance, but you see in the news this week, 25 million people will get waivers and they won't have to pay the fines. But what about the millions of people who don't get the waivers and will have to pay the fines if they don't buy government insurance? And people are just kind of seething about this. And again, it's not partisan politics. It's just when the government's picking winners and losers, and it is not fair. And you can go to the border and get that same sense. And we know that some of the big players, big corporations, I mean, they're pushing for amnesty, open borders. They want cheap labor. They've been pushing the politics of this. Big unions want new members. It's the big players here. And they're telling us, I mean, 2 years ago, the president gave an executive order basically giving amnesty for children from Central America who got here. And the word throughout Central America is if you can get your child to America, you can stay. It's not a matter of enough border guards. They're turning themselves into the border guards. They've been told if they come here, they can stay. And now that they're here, what we hear from all over is we've got to let them stay. because they can't come from oppressive situations and dangerous situations, economically depressed situations. And we have to have sympathy for that. But folks, there are millions of American children living in dangerous neighborhoods, economically depressed, going to failing schools that are dangerous. What about them? Who represents them in Washington? And we can't take care of the world. The best way for us to help the world is to make sure that America is strong and prosperous, because us trading with and developing free markets around the world has done more to lift people out of poverty than anything else. And to have a strong and focused foreign policy in Central America would do more to create stability and a better way of life than if we allow the children who are here to stay. It's an invitation to millions more of parents to put their children on these death trains. We're not compassionate by doing it this way. This is not fair, and that's what's... But we can talk about what Washington is doing wrong all the time. But I tell you, America's caught on to that. And we know from even liberals and people on the far left now, they're starting to look at their ideas and see them crash all around them. Not just with Obamacare. You can look at cities like Detroit that have been governed with liberal policies for 60 or 70 years. Some of you are not old enough to know, but Detroit used to be America's pride. It was our premier city. It was our light on the hill. And now it is just devastated by liberal progressive policy. It's a showcase of everything Obama believes in is right there in Detroit. And the same thing is going to happen to the state of Illinois and other states in a few years. The left knows their ideas are crashing down. What we have to do as conservatives, as leaders of conservatives from all over the country, is to give people a better alternative. And what they're looking for is not a lot of policy talk right now. They want to know, are we the people that will give opportunity to everyone and favoritism to no one? Will our policies create that justice that people are yearning for, that fairness in a system where we'll create a system where everybody has an opportunity to get their hand on that ladder of opportunity and that ladder of opportunity and climb as high as they can dream? Everybody does. But we're not going to have a government handing out favors to politically correct the people who are up there lobbying in Washington. We have to explain to the country that to have a better life, a better future, more prosperity and opportunity, there are really three areas as conservatives that we know are important. You've got to have a strong economy, you've got to have a strong society, and you've got to have a strong defense. It really comes down to those three things. And those people who think, well, the societal issues are really not important, we got to focus on the economy, don't understand that you can't have a strong economy unless you've got a strong society. Unless you encourage marriage and family formation, unless you encourage community development and volunteerism, the things we have to do to build a stronger society, to build better schools, more choices in schools. And what we find, folks, is this unites Americans. This is not a right or left thing. When you talk about strong and safe communities, when you talk about better schools that can be developed if states have more autonomy to develop their own schools and to give more choices, I mean, you're starting to get 70% of Americans who agree with that. And in the economic area, it's pretty simple too. And there are hundreds of things we could put on a sheet of paper, but if we open up America's energy supply, and we've seen that we have more energy than any other nation in the world, we could supply it to our allies all over the world. What it does to give opportunity and create prosperity is just incredible. What it does to help states' budgets is amazing. What it could do to the national deficit, just that one thing, that we could tell Americans, folks, that's 60 or 70 or 80% of Americans think that's a no-brainer. Let's do that to develop our economy. And just a few other things like tax reform that would allow our companies to compete around the world. We can talk about those few things: strong economy, strong society, and then a strong and focused defense. And we're seeing when America's not strong, the whole world erupts. And we don't even see it all from here. If we knew what was going on in Central America and South America because of the lack of the focus of this administration, it would scare you more than what's going on in Iran and North Korea. But this president thought that America could be one of the guys, that we didn't need to be exceptional. And what I know from talking to leaders all over the world, that if America doesn't lead, the world erupts in chaos. As conservative, we have the ideas that can create more opportunity for Americans, a better way of life. What we need to do is many, many groups, and that's what Heritage does. We work with literally hundreds of groups all around the country to talk about what are the right policies at the federal and state level, how can we get people to come together to help those policies succeed. And we're not trying to be the ones to do it all. As a lot of you know, we support every group that'll carry these ideas forward and invite candidates who want to embrace them to take those ideas and champion them. And when they are, like Jeb Hensarling, who's championing getting rid of this big export-import bank, he's our champion on that issue. And we're looking for those champions. Folks, our ideas work. States prove it. When states like Texas lower their taxes or eliminate them, they reform their lawsuit system, when they do those things, our ideas are displayed as those ideas that work. We're on the right side. Washington's not with us, but Washington has to be if we can mobilize people all over the country. That's what we want to be a part of with you over the next year. And so I understand I can take a few questions, but thanks for having me here today. Thank you.
Okay. You got the opportunity to ask questions, and I get the privilege of asking the first question because I've had people come up to me this morning and they say they live in Texas and they want to get involved, that they're at RedState, they read RedState. How can people in Texas get involved in what Heritage Foundation does?
Well, I should have said more about it, but I waxed eloquent on other subjects. But Heritage has what we call a 1-2-3 punch. On the foundation side, we do our research and policy development, and we do more and more communication through all kinds of online sources. We got a daily signal. We have America Within, which is kind of a broad platform of repositioning conservative ideas. But the third punch is Heritage Action. And what I've seen Heritage Action do some of our action people here today, I know they're one of your big sponsors. Yeah, I see a lot of hands. But what they're doing two things, and I wouldn't have come to Heritage Foundation if we didn't have action, because I was tired of losing, and I could see from being on the inside, if I were trying to stop a United Nations treaty, I would get rolled because Republicans and Democrats would want to kind of get that thing done. But when Heritage Action lights up the phones and emails through all the sentinels across the country who are trained, it backs people down. So what we're trying to do through Heritage Action, and anyone in Texas, we don't want you to get out of whatever group you're in, whether it's a Tea Party or another group, but we've got all kinds of folks working under the Heritage Action umbrella to get informed and engaged. You can get on conference calls. You can find out how to write editorials if you want to, or call into radio talk shows, but you can know how to find out how to push your congressmen and senators in the right direction. But Heritage Action already has more trained leaders around the country than Barack Obama has in his community organizing group. So that's how he won elections, and that's how we're going to win them for conservative ideas.
Hi, Myra Adams from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I'm just curious how you would respond to criticism that there has been regarding, since you took over Heritage, that Heritage is now more of an activist organization rather than a policy organization that it used to be.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've heard that criticism as well. They started that before I even actually got in the door once they heard I was coming. I actually spent most of my life in doing research, marketing ideas is my background, and Heritage Foundation has not changed as far as the research and the whole policy development for them. And we have over 300 people, and the large, not the majority, but most of them, a lot of them work on the policy side of it. We're doing more of that than we ever have, and we've always been more aggressive than other think tanks. But now we're doing more to actually advance those ideas. And what I found from being in business, just because you have a good sales and distribution system doesn't mean you don't have high quality products. In fact, it demands it. So we are doing the research, protecting the integrity of our ideas. We're doing a whole lot more of communication, and Heritage Action, which is a separate organization but very much under the total umbrella, is pushing these ideas at the grassroots level and at Congress. And to me, that makes our ideas more important. It hadn't compromised our research at all. But a lot of Republicans are complaining because with Heritage Action scorecards and everything, people are finding out how people are really voting. All the pretend votes in the Senate are being exposed for what they are, where one member, he'll vote to actually pass a bill, but then he gets to take a vote that makes it look like he's against it. We're exposing all that. It's made a lot of folks in Washington mad. And if you're... and you can count on that to continue.
Yes. Hi, Senator. I have a very liberal father who likes to remind me that you mentioned Obamacare, that the Heritage Foundation had a position in the early 90s that was basically a response, I think, to Hillary Care, that what Obamacare was based on. So with Thanksgiving only a few months away, when he asked me about that this Thanksgiving, I could say, well, I asked Senator DeMint, and he said, what?
But the question was about years ago, Heritage took a position that was similar?
Well, I never double-checked that. He says in the early 90s that the Heritage Foundation had a position
no, there
about
was
healthcare, much like
there was one particular Heritage scholar 20 years ago or so that was saying that if we went to the national health care, that the mandate would be required or something like that. I'm not really that familiar with it. But for as long as I can remember, Heritage has been for letting states compete for the best model to do their health care, of doctor-patient relationships. So as far as I'm concerned, Heritage does not want a national health care system, and we will continue to advocate for the repeal and replacement of Obamacare.
Senator DeMint, my name's Jenny. I'm a proud Heritage Action Sentinel from the state of North Carolina. I and my fellow 8,000 Sentinels have been busy fighting the export-import bank issue, but frankly, it's one of those issues that makes most activists' eyes kind of glaze over. Yeah. And Russ Vought always talks about looking at the issue from a wide-angle perspective, the wide-angle lens, which makes sense in the broader topic about cronyism. Right. Could you explain to us all and remind us about how this issue, being the poster child for corporate capitalism and cronyism, is a battle that we need to win so that we can make inroads into eliminating a lot more cronyism in our government? Thank you.
That was a great question, and she was afraid to speak in public until she joined Heritage Action. I just want you to let you know it's very good that it's a great question because the same issue came up with earmarks. I fought those for years. We finally pulled off a ban, but not because people in Washington wanted it. It's because American people finally decided that this was corrupting our whole system. But everyone said small amount of money, no big deal. A lot of Republicans said, well, we need to bring home the bacon to our districts. But it was symbolic of just the corruption, the parochialism in Washington. The Ex-Im Bank is the same thing. It is symbolic of the crony capital, crony capitalism. It gives capitalism a bad name. And when Republicans go that route, it just plays into the hands of the Democrats, for the American people, that the Republicans are in the pocket of big business. Even though all the Democrats are going to support it, they're going to point to Republicans for passing it. And so it's symbolic of a much bigger issue of crony capitalism, of unfairness, of picking winners and losers and favoritism. It's everything people don't like about Washington. What I was talking about, this justice thing, when they see everybody stand up and vote for this Ex-Im Bank, they're going to say none of them worth anything. And so it's something we have to fight. In and of itself, people's eyes do glaze over. What is the Ex-Im Bank? It's a 60-year-old big government bank. But it's just a piece of that unfairness and that injustice that's going on in Washington. If we can take it down, it'll shake up the whole establishment, just like taking down earmarks did. So it's worth the fight, and it's small enough that we could actually win. And again, the Texas Representative Jeb Hensling, head of the committee, has been a stalwart on standing against all of K Street, everybody, and a lot of people in his own party. And we got to stand behind guys who are willing to do that.
You can take the last question right here.
Yeah, first of all, I'm a huge admirer of yours, Senator DeMint. I appreciate all you do. I've always wondered, I've kind of looked over the last few years after what you've done with Senate Conservatives Fund, et cetera. I have a sense of how bad some of the Republican senators are. I would love some insight from you, without naming names, but I would love to hear just a little bit about what you've had to deal with. And we can probably guess some of the names, but yeah, if you wouldn't mind just sharing, I mean, some of your experience. And
I don't think we have enough time for me to get into how bad America deserves better, in a sense, and it frustrates me that America keeps sending folks back. I'm still a believer in term limits, and I told people I wasn't going to stay. But, you know, and I guess the sad way, we get the representation we deserve in a lot of cases. And we saw the people of Texas, you know, stand up a couple of years ago and just completely baffle the establishment and all the consultants. And, you know, everybody had said there would be another senator from Texas, but the people decided it would be Ted Cruz. And that's... And folks, you don't know how good he is. I mean, when every day, both parties, K Street, everybody's trying to take his legs out from under him, and he's stood with a lot of courage. But the reason he can, when he gets off the plane anywhere in Texas, people say, thanks for fighting, man. Thanks for standing with it. You know, it keeps bucking him up. The one thing, even though the establishment has won some races this year, if you look at how they've run their races, it's been on our ideas because of all the pressure. And while we certainly hadn't won a lot of the ones we would like to as conservatives, what we're seeing is they know that our ideas are winning elections, and they're moving that way. And it's going to make it harder for them once they get past the general election not to follow through. So I'm not discouraged at all. What I've seen is that not that the Tea Party's waning, but that spirit of resistance and pushback is actually starting to invade the incumbents there in Washington. And all the voices coming, you know, RedState being one of the premier voices that keep peppering the folks in Washington, it's making a difference. And we've got to keep up the pressure, because we can win this, we can make a difference. And I think there hadn't been this good a time in a long time where the left is so utterly failing. It's a teachable moment for America. We just have to show them the right ideas. But we have to have integrity. And like, you can't say you're against crony capitalism and then go vote for something like the Export-Import Bank. So we're trying to save the Republicans whether they like it or not, even though at Heritage, we're not supporting any candidates or any party. Let me make that clear.